Let's go off the grid. Okay. Let's go off the grid. Okay. I know that you really want to put your phone away. Yeah. Let's go off the grid.
Hello, and welcome back to Off the Grid, a podcast about running a creative small business without relying on social media. I'm your host, Amelia Fruby, and you are tuned in to our Back to Biz Refresh series, which is 5 episodes in 5 days, all about how to make pivoting fun and get ready for fall in our business. Now, if you're tuned in live, this is coming out in mid-August when many of us are kind of beginning back to school season. We're starting to think about fall, even though it's still super hot outside in many places in the Northern Hemisphere. So we're getting ready for fall. But if you're tuned in the future, this series can help you refresh your relationship to your business anytime, especially today's episode, which is all about how to give your brand a refresh. What are some things that you can do to update the visuals of your business without spending a whole lot of money hiring a brand designer or building a whole new website? I think that those are really great things to do sometimes, but often when we're feeling like we need something new, we might just want a quick shift of color, a new font, a different template or graphic. And today I am joined by a very special guest to help us think through what would it look like to do a free brand refresh. So my guest today is Alex McGinness of Arco Iris or Arco Iris Studio. Alex is an amazing brand designer. She designed the sales page for Your Attention is Sacred, and she's become one of my thought partners as I work on the rebrand for Off the Grid, which Off the Grid is undergoing a full rebrand right now, the whole process, all of it. But it started by me thinking about this brand refresh with Alex. So I want to encourage you to head to the show notes and check out Alex's website for way more support, whether you just have a couple brand questions or you want a whole new website or you need someone to design your tarot deck. Alex does all of that. And while you're checking it out, I hope you enjoy this episode on how to give your brand the free refresh it deserves before we get to fall or any new season. So let's dive in to this conversation all about a brand refresh. Hi, Alex. Welcome to Off the Grid.
Hello. I am grinning ear to ear. I am so excited to be here.
I'm really excited to talk about a brand refresh for all of our listeners. So when I reached out to you about this idea, you excitedly replied, I believe, that you actually have a framework for how to think through refreshing a brand or even building a brand if folks tuned in don't have one quite yet. So your framework is called the Resonance Lens. Could you just tell us a bit about what that is and how you designed it?
Yes, I've been a designer for over 6 years now, and in that time, I've always thought oh, I can't describe what I do. But this year, as I step into more of a teaching and mentorship role, I've been trying to put words to the craft. And the Resonance Lens is one of the ways that I have done that. So for me, what I think the Resonance Lens is a 4-part design philosophy that I have developed as a way to create design work. So this definitely applies to brands. There's 4 parts, and they are essence, which is at the root of what your brand is. How are you interwoven in it? How does it feel? That's really getting to the essence of it all. Then we have execution, which is, kind of the more boring technical side of things. Do you have the right color contrast ratio with your colors? Does your font scale properly? All of that, not so fun stuff that most likely you would want to outsource to a designer for. But it is a really important part of the process because that's what can make or break your brand looking from DIY versus very professional. There's also expression. This is more about how your visuals interplay across different media avenues, places. So for example, your website versus a print ad that you have versus if you are on social media versus your newsletter. The way that you express it should be cohesive across all mediums. And that's an important piece of the puzzle as well. And lastly, experience, which is, are you creating an experience across all those different channels? Are you actually weaving the web where someone on your website is then going to end up on your newsletter and is then going to end up in one of your offers? And, keep moving through the funnel, as they say in marketing. I don't necessarily think about it from that marketing lens. It's more about, is it all interwoven together? And are you creating that world building for people? But yeah, those are all the things that I'm thinking about when I'm putting together a brand or refreshing a brand.
Thank you so much for that. I think it's really important to have a very multifaceted approach to branding these days because, when I was a beginner and I thought about a brand, I was like colors and fonts, that's the brand.
I think we all start there.
Yeah, it's not wrong. It's just that there's so much more to it. And at the same time, sometimes when people talk about working on branding, they don't even do visuals, right? So there's so many different aspects of branding and different ways we can approach it. There are experiential brand designers where the visual is just, one tiny part of it and they're actually building events and doing large scale production as part of, a brand activation, maybe what they call that, right? Or you have brand designers who are very focused on messaging and how the brand comes through in the words. There's so much that can wrap into a brand. And what I like about your resonance lens is it makes space for all of that while also being rooted in your practice as a visual designer. And before we get to, exactly the brand refresh, I actually just wanted to ask you a little bit about your practice because something I love about your work is that, you offer website packages and the sort of quote unquote straightforward things that I think of when I think of brand designers and graphic designers. But it's rooted in a pretty magical approach. You also design tarot decks and oracle decks. You also have web templates for astrological signs and affiliations. So I'm just curious, how do you see the intersection between a sort of visual brand and a spiritual or magical practice? And how does that show up for you in your work?
Yeah, I actually think it comes back to my brand specifically, the essence of my own brand. So I actually got into this work. It was a very windy road, but I thought leaving high school that I would become a scientist. I really wanted to work in a lab. I wanted to change the world through science. That's what I thought I was going to do. And then I started to work in a lab and I did not want to do that. So, like I said, long, windy road, but eventually I started working at my local yoga studio. I started being involved in small business. And through yoga, I developed a lens towards spirituality. I discovered my inner self. I started to rediscover what it means to be a spiritual person without the confines of religion. And ultimately, also through the yoga studio, I decided I wanted to become a web designer. So all of this to say, it's rooted in who I am. There is this intersection of, okay, we have these linear things that we need to do, especially for websites. You have to be able to put the things in a way that makes sense. You need to actually be able to code the things for the website so that it works properly. But also, this comes across all the time when I talk to potential clients. You have to be able to do more than that. People are multifaceted. There is a lot to us that goes beyond just A plus B equals C. Human beings, A plus B can equals D, E, F, G. And that's not wrong. That's just how the universe works. So it really is a core tenet of my brand to be able to work in that multifaceted way and create that resonance for any type of brand.
I really appreciate that insistence on being multifaceted and the way that you let that show up in your brand and your work, or not just let it, but you center everything you do in it, right? And I love your brand is the rainbow. And that comes through on your website. It comes through when I see you on calls, it literally in your clothing choices, in your office. Everything has this rainbow color scheme in a way that, never feels like too much to me. It always feels like you're really bringing it all together. It feels like integrated and clear. And of course, not everyone needs to have a rainbow brand to be multifaceted, right?
Yes.
But I think that it's a beautiful illustration of how this core commitment to being multifaceted human beings within our brands then led to your visual brand that has these rainbow elements and so many colors woven in a really cohesive way. The same way that, all the things we do in our business weave in a cohesive way because it's us that do them. They're a part of us. They're a part of the business. And like that is what brings it all together. And so thinking about how your brand reflects your values and your ethos, I want to step back into our brand refresh that we're offering for folks and go back to those 4 parts of the resonance lens framework and talk a little bit about how we can think of each one. So just to recap or remind folks, the 4 parts of the resonance lens framework are essence, execution, expression, and experience. So we're going to go through those one at a time. And Alex is going to talk a little bit about how we can sort of use each of those pillars to revisit our brand, or again, if you're brand new, pun intended, to branding, you can think about this as like how to create a brand as well. I think it'll work both ways, but maybe a little better for folks with an existing brand who are just trying to kind of reconnect and refresh. So we'll start with essence. Alex, how do we refresh our brands from the perspective of essence?
As you were speaking, I think a great way for me to illustrate this is through my own brand. So I know you said you love that my brand is very rainbow centric and it really fits who I am very well, but it wasn't always that way. I started my brand a long, long time ago, over 6 years ago. And when I was first starting, I was just like anyone that was starting a business. I had a million things I had to do, and this was the last thing on my list of things that I wanted to focus on. Obviously, it was important, but it wasn't the top biggest priority. Making sure I filed my taxes correctly is more important first. But after a few years of being in business, I felt an incongruence with the brand I had developed at the very beginning and who I was turning out to be as a designer. So ultimately, what actually led to be rebranding my business was my lawyer at the time told me I couldn't trademark my business name, so I had to completely change my business name. Highly recommend you look up your business name before you commit to it first. That's like a little aside, but Google it and just make sure no one else has it, and then you won't end up in a situation like I did. I will say it ended up being fine and it worked out for the best, but when that happened, of course, obviously I freaked out because who wouldn't in that situation? She was just like, I need you to come up with Google, but obviously not Google, but something unique and original like that. And that really got me to start thinking about who I am and who I want to be perceived to be through the business. Like, what are the values of the business and what am I actually trying to do for people through this work? So it all came back to myself. I'm very rooted in my own business. And I would imagine that for a lot of your audience, it is very personal brand centric. So thinking about me and my values was the center point. So that's my recommendation for you. When you're thinking about your essence, think about who you are and what you're trying to convey to other people. For me, what I was trying to convey was I'm a very artistic person that is committed to being a creative person in this lifetime. I'm not the type of designer that has like a specific like visual style. I love to bop around in different styles and different ways of doing things. So when I was really sitting with that and thinking about what do I do, the rainbow just kept coming up to the point that I realized like oh, I am multifaceted. I am the rainbow. And then everything started to fall into place after that. So that's my recommendation. Start with yourself. Start with what really hits home for you. And then from there, you can build a story around it.
Yeah, I love this example of how you've rooted into your values. Also, the reminder that we can, check the names of our businesses, see if other people are using them. You can just search that, but also use the US Trademark Office search that is helpful in that arena. Now I'm reflecting on when I started Softer Sounds and went through my initial branding exercise. Because when I started my business, I did my own branding. I'm not a brand designer, but I didn't have any money. So I was like, me and Canva got to be friends. So I Googled what fonts can you use in Squarespace and Canva because I needed them to be easy. And then I used, I think, the Coolers color search to build a color palette and kind of recommend different things. And I was able to do that because I knew what I was rooted in and I knew myself, as you said. So I knew that I wanted the brand to have a sort of soft feeling to it. And so I picked this sort of pinkish coral color. I had sort of a cream color. And when I started to put that together, I was like, oh, but I don't want it to feel so traditionally feminine. When I was looking at it, I was like, this feels a little girly, in a very normative way. And I was like, that's fine, but that's not quite what I want. So then I picked a dark navy blue because I was like, I'm soft, but I'm very firm and boundaried. And I have I have a lot of Capricorn energy. So I brought in a blue and a black to really ground these lighter, softer colors. And so I'm remembering this now, and I don't even know if I've ever talked about this. It really was the values and the ethos that led me toward the colors I wanted to use. And then it was sort of technology that got me to pick the particular fonts because I was like, I have some tech specs here that matter, which I think actually takes us into a bit of the second pillar of the framework and talking about a brand refresh from that perspective. So once we've checked in with the essence, we've thought about if our brand feels like us or still feels like us, we've considered how it might appeal to the people we actually want to reach. Then we move on from essence to execution. So could you talk a little bit about how we can refresh our brand through the lens of execution?
Yes, I think especially for those of us that are doing it ourselves, which I would imagine a lot of people in this community are, the biggest thing that you're going to want to check from an execution perspective is your logo and your colors. Those are the two big ones I want to highlight. For your logo, it's just making sure that your logo looks good at various sizes. So I keep bringing up social media as an example, even though we're anti-social media over here. But if you think about seeing your logo on an Instagram profile picture, that's a very small piece of real estate versus what if you put your logo on a billboard? You actually need your logo to look great and be readable at both sizes without changing anything about the logo. And a lot of the times when I see people that create logos on their own, they're very detailed. There's a lot of words, and sometimes stuff can just get lost, whether it's when you shrink it down and then you can't read the words, or you blow it up and then something becomes super blurry. So that would be one of the main things that I recommend checking. And if it's not quite working when you do those tests, simplify. Logos are purposely supposed to be simple, and then you can use other elements in your brand to support it. So, just as a random example, I love unicorns. They're a signature visual element that I have in my brand, but you wouldn't know that from my logo at all. There's no unicorns featured at all. That's just something I bring in other places, and that's totally fine because it doesn't need to be in the logo. The other thing is colors, and this one's really, really important from an accessibility perspective. So you brought up colors, I think you said, for creating your color palette. which that is a fantastic tool. I highly recommend it. And they actually have a color accessibility checker now, which I don't know if that existed when you first created your color palette.
I definitely did not back then, but I love that it exists now.
Yeah. So essentially what happens, and this is specific for when you're doing stuff digitally. So if you're creating digital flyers, creating your website, stuff like that, the way people see color is not all the same. So if you think about it, people with different types of blindness might not be able to see colors the same way as a quote unquote typical person would. And we need to make sure that our brands are accessible to all kinds of people. So running the colors in your color palette through an accessibility checker will ensure that you have the right contrast ratios. I don't know what the contrast ratio has to be exactly off the top of my head, but these tools will just tell you it passes or it doesn't pass. And then you can see, oh, okay, my color palette works for all people to be able to see. Or, oh, I actually need to adjust a couple things so that this will work and everyone would be able to interact with my brand without issues. So that's what I would recommend as your starting point with execution, just checking those two things because they're easy to forget about, but they're important for lots of different reasons. One being it means more people can interact with your work. And also, for most of us in this community, from a values perspective, we do want all different types of people to be able to interact with our work. So those are the two big ones I would recommend for this.
I think this emphasis on accessibility is great, and I agree it's really important. And it just makes for better brands, in my opinion. The visuals are just better if they are accessible because there's more contrast, and that's going to allow more depth of field and otherwise. And so I think that that helps all of us when we do that, the same way that adding alt text to your images helps everyone when you do that. The other thing that's coming up for me here, so you mentioned checking your colors for accessibility and contrast, checking your logo that it's clear at any size, anywhere that you're using it. For some of our beginners out there, you may just have a word mark. That's cool too. It may just be the font, but making sure that it's put in well anywhere that you've created it. And I'm also thinking here, I guess, of the fonts. And something that I do a lot when people come to me with a brand question, which is not that often, but like when they show me a website for feedback in the interweb or we're looking at something, I will go back to some very basic advice, which is like 2 fonts, maybe 3 if you're fancy. But I think that this is also like a basic for a refresh for your brand, going through and just making sure like, did some extra fonts or colors sneak in as you started making graphics for something new? What is like your actual brand? And sometimes I think that, because we have to create so many assets for things, or we add new pages to our site, or we do a collab with someone who has a different brand than us, sometimes in the execution of living out our brand, we start to lose the essence of it. And so something I'm just thinking here too, when we're talking about, essence and execution in a brand refresh, just going back to like, what is that core? Where have you added more elements? Do you want to wrap them into the core, or do you want to kind of let them go and clear them off the site? Whether that be an extra font that you're like, oh, I don't actually need that. Or maybe there is an accent color you added and you're like, actually, that's great. Let's put that on more stuff. And so this could be a nice opportunity to check in with that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And to speak on the fonts just briefly-ish, I will say something to keep in mind as you're looking through your fonts is, are they legible? That's the most important thing that you can keep in mind when picking fonts for your brand, especially for a logo, and actually especially for body copy, which is you have a paragraph of text on your website to describe X, Y, or Z about your business, and it's a large body of text, that's body copy. So in situations like that where you're not sure what to use, simple is better. A nice, clean sans serif font is going to do so much more for you than picking something really frilly and difficult to read. So yeah, just want to highlight that because you're totally right, Amelia. Fonts are super important too, and they're an easy place to get carried away.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really glad you mentioned that because, I love weird, wild, wacky script font or glitchy font. And also, we have to hold ourselves back. Like, if I could put every word I write in the off the grid font, I probably would, but no one could ever read anything I'm writing. It only works with a really broad letter spacing in an image where, like, it's very, very clear. I had to actually pull it out of, I used to use it in all my presentations as like a title font. And someone was finally like, Amelia, I can't read anything that you put on your titles because this font is not legible when you have a lot of words close together. So I finally had to be like, okay, I have to give up my attachment to this font because people can't read it. And at the end of the day, if they can't read it, like, what am I doing here?
Yeah, and trust me, I get it. Like, I design tarot decks. The weirder, the better. But we're creating brands here. Ultimately, we're trying to do the whole capitalism thing by subverting capitalism. And in order to do that properly, there are like little tricks that we can bring into our brands to make our businesses more effective.
To make our communication more effective and also to make our conversion more effective, right? So I think those two can come hand in hand. Thinking about that, thinking about all the different places that our brand can show up, all the different ways that we might want to appear on different channels or platforms, I'd love to talk about the third pillar of your resonance framework and how we can use that to refresh our brands. So could you talk a little bit about expression and how that comes into this brand refresh?
Yes, absolutely. So, expression is a piece of this that I think often gets lost because it's one of those things that's hard to grasp if you don't have the essence and the execution figured out. So, getting those two nailed down will help you move into the next two expression and experience parts of this puzzle. Expression is about making sure everything across all different channels where you show up is as cohesive as possible. So you were saying at the beginning of this conversation that like my website is very branded and feels a certain kind of way, but then I reflect that in the clothing that I wear, and my office background emulates some of those like rainbow centric themes. And that is also true on my newsletter and on Substack and other places where I show up. This crosses both the places you show up online and the places you show up in real life. So that's why I like to bring up like the clothing piece, because if you're networking or connecting with people in real life, you want that expression piece to match how you show up online. I can't tell you how many people I meet in real life. They're doing amazing things in their businesses. I'm like so inspired. I want to connect with them. It's so cool. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited to work with you. And then I go on their website and it looks like it was made in 1999 and not in a good way. That always leaves me feeling very sad because I'm a web designer and I know it could be so much better, but also because it's doing them a disservice. I had such a brilliant connection with them. And then I went on their website and just all of that was stopped in its tracks. So I kind of like see it from two perspectives of like, oh no, that this isn't working. And then also I'm like, okay, I know why it isn't working and why we need to fix it. But like for someone else that connects with the same person and that goes on their website and has that experience, that might just like immediately cause them to lose trust. And then they never reach out and that person like loses that potential opportunity to build a connection with someone that they met. So expression also connects to conversion of like creating that cohesion so that we can really like create the community and the connection that we want to see in the world and foster that community that we're all trying to build.
Yeah, I think as I'm listening to you, I'm kind of holding two truths at once that are a little bit contradictory. And one is that having a website is better than having no website. And also sometimes having no website is better than having a bad website. So like,
Oh, 100%. Yes.
but I think both are true. What I would love to see more people do is if you don't have the capacity to have a full website, if you don't really know your brand, if you're not sure about your messaging, I would love some type of like holding space, like a link tree or just like a one page, here's my picture, here's my bio, here's some links to my work, other places, or how to get on my newsletter or something. I definitely get outreach from people sometimes who have no website, and I don't quite know what to do with it because, I work in the realm of creative online business. If you don't have a website, I don't mean to be harsh, but like if you don't have a website, I'm not going to put you on the podcast because my listeners can't connect with you online. And so I think that is true. Having a website is better than having no website. But having like a Squarespace site that's totally empty and only talks about work you did 10 years ago and feels really out of date or mismatched with who people are encountering in the world when they meet you, that's also not good. So you also having a bad website can be worse than having no website. And so I think there are like different degrees of expression here and like where you're showing up and how you're showing up. But I think the first thing I'm thinking of is how do we let go of the perfectionism enough to just get the website live, but also be more thoughtful about what our online presence is like?
Yeah, absolutely. This reminds me of the week of websites that we were doing. So I talked through building a one-page website on Squarespace, but then you had a follow-up where you were showing people other platforms that they could use to build websites, even just something as simple as like putting a page on Notion and then taking that live. If you're really stuck on what to do for this expression piece, especially for the website side of things, because websites are so involved, and that's a completely separate conversation that we could just totally tangent into and never stop talking about. But if you're unsure what to do, less is more. In those instances, that's where I think your recommendation of like putting up a page on Notion with links of this is how you actually connect with me. Here's my booking calendar, blah, 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 blah. Like something like that is going to be more powerful than trying to create like a strong website and then failing. So it's just kind of like honoring your capacity, knowing where you are in the moment of when you're doing this refresh. Do you really have the space to figure out how to build a cool, amazing, awesome website right now? Is that something high on your priority list that is like really important to you? Or is it just kind of like, okay, this is something that I need and I feel like I have to have, per your point, Amelia? And then based on that answer, you can choose your path. If you just feel like you have to have it, maybe choose something simpler. If you really feel like a website's going to take you to the next level, then you can explore really creating that like cohesive experience.
Yeah, I just really love this less is more reminder. And this is definitely a permission slip from me for anyone listening to this who's like, oh, my Squarespace site is truly never going to get done. Just, abandon it. That's the permission slip. Abandon the Squarespace site. Get yourself a nice little one-page website. Put up a Notion page. Whatever works for you and your brain and your process, let it be easy for now. And when your business is doing well, when you have some savings, when things are really taking off, then hire a designer to build it out for you. Again, some of this too, I think, goes from like, are you in a place where your capacity is DIY only and I barely have the capacity for that? Or are you in a place where like your business is really growing and you have the space and the need to upgrade your brand, right? So if your business is doing really well, maybe it's time to actually invest in branding, work with somebody like Alex. That's definitely where I found myself at the end of 2024. I was like, everything is getting bigger and better, and I want my visuals to represent that, and I can't do it myself, right? So I hit the max of my DIY skill level, I guess, because I'm not a visual designer. I was just making it work. And so for my rebrand, I worked with Sharon Wagner as Whale Studio. But then, after I met you, I worked with you on the webpage for the book and things like that. So just a reminder to people that like, you don't have to build outside your capacity. And also you can like believe in your business and focus on those things. Like you said earlier, Alex, right? Like I needed to pay my taxes correctly before I was like investing a ton in building this brand. So knowing where you are in your business too can be helpful. Like, are you listening to this episode to do a quick refresh and zhuzh of your brand this summer? Or are you maybe realizing that some deeper supported work could be helpful? Hey there, Off the Grid listeners. Amelia here, popping in because I want to make sure that you know that if you're enjoying this episode, there is actually an entire workshop with Alex inside the interweb. And she referenced it earlier with our week of websites. So Alex taught a workshop on how to build a one-page website. And then I led a follow-up session on different website platforms that are incredibly affordable and easy to work with if you're just getting started with your business. So if you're loving this episode, you can apply everything we say here for free, but you can also get on the interweb waitlist and join us inside the membership to get a full class on this and lots of support inside our members only Slack. So whenever you're hearing this, you can always get on the interweb waitlist, join the next time doors are open, and come on in. Take Alex's workshop, ask me questions in Slack, get support and feedback from our community, and build a beautiful website for your business, or rebuild or refresh the existing one you already have. If that's appealing, head to the show notes, put yourself on the interweb waitlist, and now let's get back to the conversation. I think the other piece of expression for me, or the advice I might give here is, we're talking about treating your brand like a world that happens on many different platforms, not just like X plus Y plus Z, but like, what does that get you? And I think that this is a nice place to go through and be like, okay, what are the platforms I'm showing up on? How does my brand appear there? Maybe you want to weed out some platforms, right? You're like, I'm going to get rid of my Substack. It doesn't work. Or I'm going to let go of my Squarespace site because I'm not actually filling it out. And then with the ones that you're keeping, just noticing, are the visuals consistent? Do the values come through? Do the colors match? Do the fonts feel good? Are you speaking in the same tone? Like all of that then goes into expression. So that'd be my advice here. Track everywhere you're showing up online with your business and in person with your style, as we've said here. And then go through and ask yourself, like, do I still want to be there? And if I do want to be there, is the way I'm showing up cohesive with how I am arriving elsewhere? So I think that can be really nice for expression.
And just to highlight that piece that you brought up at the end, it does go offline too. So how you show up in real life when you're connecting with other business owners and other potential clients, customers, that kind of thing. How you show up there also is a piece of this. So if you're at a point where you're like, okay, I'm feeling really good about this, I'm ready to take it to the next level, that might be a place to really hone in on of, okay, does how I actually show up in this networking space align with the values that I'm putting forth through the brand? So that's kind of like the 2.0 version of opportunities for refreshing.
100%. Because wouldn't it be so weird if me, the founder of Softer Sounds, was yelling in every room that I entered?
I can't even imagine that.
Because it's not who I am, right? Like, that would be weird. I'm sure if we all thought about it, we've met at least one business owner where we're like, you do that? Right? Because it just doesn't make sense. And to me, like, I love when people do something weird or nonsensical for a moment in their business, but it only really works if there is a sort of cohesive worldview and brand undergirding it. So yes, do not be the person who runs Softer Sounds and yells in every room you go into. Allow your brand to like travel with you as you move through different spaces, which really then perfectly takes us to your fourth pillar of this resonance lens framework, which is experience. So how can we take this into our brand refresh?
This lens is a way of holistically looking at your brand and how you're choosing to build your business, but you're not going to have all things figured out all the time. Experience really is about like, how do you lead people through the journey of interacting with your brand from that moment of like, I just connected with your business. Someone sent me your newsletter and now I signed up, I'm in it. How do I work with you? And how do I learn more about you? And all of those different pieces of like how to bring people down the journey. What I recommend is not doing what I did and, just throwing spaghetti at the wall. I know we all love to do that, especially us multifaceted people. It's so easy to just have an idea and execute it when the energy's really high and we're so excited about the thing. But sometimes a great idea in the moment is not actually great for the brand overall. I have it's kind of a funny example. So this was like years ago. I randomly, at the end of the year, it was like right after Christmas, I hadn't purchased a planner for the following year. And I decided I'm going to make my own. Like, I'm a designer. I can do this. I'm going to make my own. And then like 3 nights later, I stayed up till like 4 a.m. each night. I had like a whole planner designed and I was like, oh my God, and I'm going to sell it and people are going to love it and it's going to be so amazing. But I didn't know how that connected to the greater ecosystem of my brand. So, of course, when I was then shared with the world that I had made this amazing planner that I was so excited to use, I think like one person bought it. And it's because there was a mismatch, that it didn't connect to anything. It was just like an idea I had, a spark that I had, and it's great. Like, I executed it, I did the thing, but it didn't actually make sense with what I was building for the business. So, yes, it related to design because I designed it, but besides that, it didn't connect to anything else. I had no thought process of like, oh, okay, so someone buys the planner. What happens next? I didn't think through any of that. And it showed. I definitely think this is like one of the hardest things to have figured out in your business. Or at least for me, it's the hardest because I'm so like creative and ADHD like, and I just like have a million things that pop up that seem exciting. So I totally get that this is not the easiest one to have totally figured out. But the more that you create those connections between one thing that you're doing and then something else, then you can move people through your world and get paid properly for the amazing work you do in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is really important. And it's one of those pieces of branding that like is a really important part of a brand, but goes far beyond the visual or aesthetic aspects. Inside the interweb, we have a couple workshops that I think are actually really supportive for this. So my Mapping Your Business Ecosystem workshop really walks people through how to sort of map all of the marketing you're doing and all of your offerings and then see like, are you doing any marketing that doesn't connect to an offering? Or do you have any offerings that are like stranded in some random corner of your business and you never talk about them so they're not selling? I think that's one important thing. There's also a workshop in the interweb from Heather of Small Business Rodeo on customer journey mapping, which is really great for this and thinking through like how people come into your business. But even on the like website level, something I was thinking about here is like how we designed the book sales page together, right? So when I was selling my book, I had a sales page on my Squarespace site and I was using the Squarespace shop to sell the book. But the book was my only product. So I didn't really want, when you clicked the button to buy the book, I didn't want it to add to cart and then leave you on the sales page and you have to go find the cart to check out. I was like, that's not a good flow. People aren't going to figure that out because they're not actually shopping, from a store with a bunch of options on my site. They're just on a sales page. They're going to pick the version of the book they want, and then I want them to directly pay for it. So you helped me and made some custom code that took people straight to cart. And that was so important. And that's a piece of this. Like, that's part of the experience, right? And that was very conversion minded, but it also connects to my brand of just wanting things to be simple and to feel strategic. And that's a big part of Off the Grid. And so I think this is where that experience pillar and your framework comes in and why it's really important, in my opinion, to work with a brand designer who is also a creative business owner and has a strategic mindset. Because if you didn't see why it was important that people go directly to cart, that would have been like a friction point for us in that working relationship. And I would have had to figure that out separately, right? But because you weave experience into the brand, you saw why that was so important and we figured that out together.
Yeah, absolutely. Something you said earlier like comes into play here. Like, I definitely think essence and execution, that part of the framework leans more towards like the visual design side of things. And then the expression and experience leans more to the strategy side of things when it comes to branding. So the first two are probably easier to like wrap your head around because it's like, oh, okay, the fonts, the colors, does it actually vibe with who I am? Like, That's much more straightforward than like, okay, is what I'm doing actually rooted in what I'm trying to do with this business? You know what I mean? But all four of these tenets are very important because it's going to create a long-lasting business for you and a long-lasting brand. Another thing that I didn't bring up that I think is super important to bring up with this experience piece is that you're allowed to change. So something with the experience is like, you might have thought that you had to do things a certain way like a couple years ago, and then you learned, you grew, and you've actually completely like flip-flopped the way you're doing things, or you're adding a new service that you never thought that you would do before, something like that. The experience is thinking about your brand in a way that can grow with you as those changes occur, because like we're not static beings. I mean, it would be so much easier if we were, but like we're not, and we're all multifaceted and we change and evolve and grow as time goes on. And our brands need to be able to adapt and grow with us as well. So, your brand that you had done 10 years ago might not match up with who you are now because so many things have evolved since then. And this experience piece also touches on that of like, yeah, you might need to go back to these other pieces of the puzzle, the essence, the execution, the expression, because things aren't quite aligning the way they're supposed to anymore because you fundamentally have changed.
I really love this reminder. And I remember when I hosted Sharon of Swale Studio for a brand AMA in the interweb, one of my questions to her was, how often is too often to redo your brand? Like, if you're changing all the time, how long should you stick with it? And I think in the beginning, frankly, you might change your brand a lot until you settle on something. And then in my experience, 3 to 10 years is sort of the range for how long I see brands still stay connected to the essence of the founder and connected to like broader trends and what's happening in any given industry, right? Some refreshing, some changes seem to be necessary at least every decade. But if you don't stick with a brand for at least a few years, it's hard for people to recognize it as such and to sort of own, quote unquote, your space in the space. So I really love that reminder. And thank you so much for that. I was diligently taking notes while we were talking, and I wanted to leave listeners with a little recap, a little like to-do list of what you can take away from this episode. So if you, dear listener, want to do your own brand refresh, having listened to Alex and I chat, I'm going to give you your checklist and then let Alex chime in on any additional to-dos. So first, you're going to reconnect with your essence. And that means going back through your core values and just doing a gut check if your fonts and colors and general visual aesthetics still align with and express those values. That's our essence check. Relist your values, check in on your visual basics to make sure they feel connected. Then we move to execution. That's where you're going to look and make sure that you have legible fonts, accessible colors, and flexible size logos. So with execution, those are kind of the big three. There's so much more there we could get into, but at least those three would be great as a quick brand refresh. Then we go to expression. This is where I want you to audit where you show up online and offline, like as your business. So all the platforms, all the spaces, make a list. And then check how your brand appears in each space. And also maybe check if you still want to be there. Like, do you have a random X account floating out there that you haven't looked at in 7 years? Maybe it's time to delete it. You don't need to refresh the brand on places where you're not active. You can just let them go. But that's expression, is like checking in on where is your brand showing up and are the visuals and the vibe cohesive in those spaces. And then finally, we had experience. This is where you're going to step into mapping your business ecosystem and your customer journey, thinking about the way that other people move through and experience your business, and checking in to see if that is working or if you have a few too many random tangents, and maybe you can rein some of them in, which, believe me, I definitely have a lot of random tangent projects in my own businesses.
Me too.
So real. I mean, that's what makes us good entrepreneurs, is we have a ton of ideas and we can execute them and we love to spin them up, but it's not always the best experience for our communities if we're doing that 100% of the time, right? So
yeah.
that was kind of the to-do list I came up with, Alex. Is there anything else that you would add in that folks should do if they want a brand refresh this season?
I would just remember that this is supposed to be fun. The whole point of having a business is to have fun, and your brand shouldn't be built in a way that makes you feel like you're putting yourself in a box or like you're doing things because you quote unquote have to. Take these concepts, apply them as best you can, and know that it's also okay to bend the rules a little bit. You can have fun with it and you can make it fit to your own business and your own lifestyle, what makes sense for you. And of course, people like Amelia and I are always here to support you if you're unsure of like how to actually make that happen.
Yes, 100%. Alex, this has been so helpful, and I'm excited to refresh my brands, plural, because I have 3 this summer. But before we go, could you tell folks how they can connect with you and, where a good entry point into your world is?
I think the best way to connect with me is through my website. It's Arcoiris, ARCOIRIS.design. And there I have links to everything. I do a weekly newsletter that goes out. It's called Rainbow Reflections. I sometimes share personal essays or more like execute something specific about your website. We run the whole gamut over here.
With all of that shared, I think I'm going to get off this recording and go work on my brand. How about you, Alex?
I am too, actually.
All right. Well, until next time, friends, we will see you off the grid. Bye.
I kinda hate social media, feeds on my brain like a bacteria. If you read my Wikipedia, it'll say I kinda hate social media. Post a picture of myself, sacrifice my mental health, use your product, time to sell. I would rather go to hell. Do you like this? Leave a comment. Can you share this? Will you wear this? Do you like this? Leave a comment. Can you share this? Will you wear this? Okay.
That was an abridged version of Social Media by Surfer Boy and Rectangle. To hear the entire song, find Surfer Boy on Spotify or head to the link in the show notes. Thanks so much to them for sharing the song with us, as well as to Melissa Caitlin Carter, who sings our theme song that you hear at the start of every show. I'm your host, Amelia Fruby, and if you enjoyed this episode, I hope you will download the free Leaving Social Media Toolkit at offthegrid.fun/toolkit. Until next time, I will see you off the grid.